Welcome back, folks. This is The Rebel's Edge. Of course, you recognize Pete Najarian, also the host of The Take, 10:30 a.m. every business day on the East Coast time, 10:30 a.m., right, Pete?
Yep.
And, of course, also on his Sunday morning talk show with Maxie, carried by Odyssey Radio, the Sports Huddle.
Yeah.
So we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit too. But Pete, we got to start today, the Rebel's Edge, with recession. Because I saw one of the president's advisors saying that, well, it's just a technical recession. And it's like, it's also a textbook definition of recession. 2 negative quarters in a row, which is what we've had. And he did accurately say, this is Brian Deese I'm talking about, Pete. He actually did accurately say that at least we're not in a famine like some places before.
Thank God.
I looked around and I'm thinking, was that one of the options? Was, well, I guess it's better than being in a famine. Well, for sure, being in a recession is better than being in a famine. I think we can both say that. But nonetheless, seeing the GDP contract, because it's not just flat, folks, it's actually negative. Yeah. When it's negative for 2 quarters in a row, that tells you we're in a recession. And that's scary to a lot of people, Pete.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be as scared as they are, though, John. I think the word recession gets people freaked out. They should be freaked out if they hear depression. But if it's recession, that's a little different. We're talking about something that's usually shallower. We're talking also about the inflationary side of a recession. That's what this is right now. And those are normally, you can navigate those pretty well, John. We're not talking about loan defaults, at least in the past. If we go off of the past, it's a different path. But it's still something that I think we have to acknowledge. That's where we are. But Powell continues to say, well, we're not there yet. And so, you know what? I'll let the Fed chair hold on to that for a while because, quite frankly, I don't think it's something we have to be as worried about as people probably are perceiving.
Yep. And just real quick, folks, we've heard it from Walmart twice now, 2 quarters in a row. We've heard it from Target. Now we just heard it last night from Best Buy. And that's why we're citing it for you here. But Pete, what about this Meta debacle? I mean, Meta, I don't know what's worse, them changing their name from Facebook, which has movies named after it, books written about it and all that kind of stuff, to Meta right at a time when we're entering a sort of crypto winter of sorts. Yeah. A lot of people would say, why did you change your name to Meta then?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, John. And you know what? This is a classic case of a company that was a monster. They had a monster growth, but then all of a sudden the growth side of the equation started to slow down. That's what we've been seeing for the last few quarters. Specifically, when you look at what they reported, it's why the stock is under, a huge amount of pressure today. Even though the markets have flipped, John, the markets were down a couple hundred points. Now we're positive. And yet Meta is off the lows, but it's still getting hammered for all the right reasons. Is it a value play? Is it a growth play? I can tell you this, it ain't a growth play anymore. It is a value play for sure. And they're an interesting company, but John, they're even getting blocked right now by the FTC with this acquisition that they're trying to do in the virtual reality world. So they're facing a lot of different things right now. I think that the focus on Meta, and you and I have talked about it in previous quarters when it became a bigger and bigger thing, and they started last quarter, I believe, they wanted to spend all this money on this. And yes, they've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of cash. They generate a lot of cash, but they've slowed down and they are really not growing anymore. And that can be a big issue.
Yeah. Economic downturn, they said, Pete, having a broad impact. So they joined that chorus of those retailers I talked about, saying the situation's not getting better, it's getting worse. That doesn't mean that, like Pete said, they couldn't be a buy down here at some level, because digital ads aren't going away, folks. And that's where Facebook makes their money, Pete.
John, we talk a lot about EVs. How about solar? We don't talk as much about that. So I'm curious your thoughts on what's going on right now. You got Manchin, you got this, you've got that, you got Schumer. All these different things are coming together. But what are your thoughts? Because I know we see some big moves in the solar complex right now.
Yeah, for sure, Pete. I mean, Nova, N-O-V-A, First Solar, FSLR, SunPower, SPWR, and Sun Run, I think it's called,
Yep.
RUN. Those are the symbols. Why are they up so much? Some of them up as much as 25% today. That's because, like Pete said, Joe Manchin, the sometime recalcitrant senator from West Virginia that's been blocking a lot of spending. Thank God, by the way, Pete. Otherwise, we'd be at 14% CPI instead of a little over 9. The consumer price index going up, that is. But I think this is a good thing, getting some credits for people that are willing to install solar, getting some of those EV credits restored for some of the EVs that people might want to buy, not just Tesla, but Ford and General Motors and so forth. I think that's a big part of this bill, Pete, that Schumer basically pared way down on the bill and focused it more on, you know, this kind of support for this economy, this side of the green economy. And that's why those stocks are up so big.
Flying, absolutely ripping to the upside, John, just like the market was yesterday, as a matter of fact, when we just flew to the upside, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, everything. The 10-year extension for those tax incentives, I thought was pretty interesting, because if you really go back in time and take a look at Tesla, you can understand why Tesla's gotten to the point where they are now. And I think a lot of that credit goes to that type of an outlook and how they're trying to administer this whole thing. So that's all great. John, we got big earnings tonight, man. We got Apple, we got Amazon. I mean, these are the big boys. These are the big boys. And I'll tell you what, I'll start off with Apple and just say this.
All right.
Amazing company. They've had a rocket ship move off of the lows recently to where they are right now, actually. And so you just kind of wonder going into earnings. And this is the puzzle we all try to figure out, right? Because they've made a big move into earnings. They haven't gotten their earnings yet. That's tonight. And everybody's just kind of curious, well, what's going on? China had another set of lockdowns during the last quarter. There's all kinds of different things. And that is the growth engine. So what will they be able to report? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody has the answer to that, but we've had a big run, and we'll see, John, will they start buying Apple calls about a half hour before the close, or do they go to the puts? We saw it happen with Walmart the other day. We also saw it happen in a positive way with Microsoft. What's your take, and what do you think of Amazon right now?
Well, and Pete's right, folks. We saw unusual put buying in Walmart, which resulted in the stock going down. If you don't trade options, that's okay. If we see puts, that means downward pressure. If we see call buying, that means upward pressure. And Pete accurately said Microsoft was upward. I think we'll probably get a positive out of Apple, Pete, but Amazon, that's one I think that where we're going to get the biggest positive is they built out like crazy during the pandemic. And so a lot of that so-called CapEx, that spending that they did, they're not going to have to do nearly as much. I think they put that on hold for a bit, Pete. Yeah. And since they spend billions of dollars on that kind of outlay, that CapEx, I think without that spending, a lot of their growth looks even better going forward. So full disclosure, I bought it last week at about 109 and 110 aggressively, bought thousands of shares down there. It's worked out really well so far. I'm holding it because I think it goes a lot higher, Pete.
You might want to sell some calls into that one, John, towards the end of the day.
Yeah.
Take advantage of that implied volatility. I mean, that's the way to go. So we've got unusual option activity. We always have that. We want to deliver that. John, start it off with Newmont.
Yep. Newmont is a gold miner, folks. And yesterday we saw unusual activity in the GLD. Now, the GLD is an ETF, an exchange traded fund that tracks gold, not just miners, gold itself. And it obviously invests in a lot of those miners that are pulling it out of the ground. Newmont, we saw almost 10,000 calls. Now, every call is for 100 shares of stock. So that means when we see call buying, we're saying, wow, 1 million shares of stock could be bought by the exercise of these calls. That's bullish. And they were buying further out in time, Pete, not looking at where it's going to be tomorrow or next week. They were buying January 60 calls with that particular stock, NEM, trading at 45. So that tells you they're looking for lower left to upper right on the chart. And that could happen, Pete, very quickly. Do you have any thoughts about gold or silver?
Well, I do, only because AJ filled in. You were traveling on Tuesday. AJ talked about gold and he thought it had bottomed and he was looking for this to make a monstrous move to the upside as well. So that all plays together very much so, John. And it makes a lot of sense to me because we've been wondering, when are they going to make the move in gold or silver or some of these precious metals that we talk about a lot, but we haven't seen a whole lot of action there. But we have seen some options really start to accelerate over the last week or so, specifically in gold, the ETFs themselves, or the actual, individual names that are out there as well. So it's pretty interesting. I've got an unusual for you, John. It kind of tags on to what we were just talking about when we were speaking about solar in a way. It's in the battery space, and it's ChargePoint. And this name, John, I have not seen a name that hits as frequently as this name does for unusual option activity. I just got done selling what was a very good trade in ChargePoint just this morning, and 15 minutes later, we get hit with two more looking for more upside. They started off early on with one that's expiring tomorrow. I'll just say what it is, but that's not where I'm focused. They bought 8,600 of the 16 calls that expire tomorrow. That's a pretty interesting trade. It's a good size trade, everything else. How about this one? They came back like an hour later. They bought 50,000 of next Friday's expiring 15 calls for $1. Stock is right around that 15 level. Amazing to see those kind of size trades come in, but we see it all the time in this name. This is a name where 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, now 50,000. It's almost commonplace, but it's pretty interesting to see. These are massive trades that are coming into that space, John. So maybe just kind of playing off the whole EV, solar, and all the rest of it, going to the alternative energy plays. Maybe that's just a big part of what we're seeing there.
Yep, I agree, Pete. And ChargePoint, like you say, playing off of that bill that's working its way through Congress, worked its way through the Senate, now going on over to the House. And I think that, Joe Biden wanted to get 500,000 fast charging stations out in the United States, Pete. That's Blink, B-L-I-N-K. That's ChargePoint. I think both of those need to happen to have this network truly support all the people that could be in these vehicles, given what we have already talked about as far as these credits that are out there.
Yeah.
So, Pete, I don't know if you've seen these. They kind of look funky. They're called Guardian caps, and they're things that football teams are wearing on top of their helmets.
Yep.
So a Guardian cap looks an awful lot like a series of inner tubes wrapped around a helmet.
Yeah.
They're funky looking, but they supposedly cut down on head trauma by about 33%, which is huge. Now, they're not going to wear them in the games. Right. They're wearing them in practice for 1 month as they get ready for the preseason games and so forth, to make sure they don't accidentally butt heads and have somebody get a concussion. Pete, you played for 6 years in the NFL and a couple of years in the other leagues. Tell us a little bit maybe about those sort of protections.
Well, I think it's a great idea, John. They want to protect the head. That's obviously something that I think the NFL is very committed to. And obviously over the last, decade or more, they focused on CTE and all the different issues that players are having. And we continue to lose guys at too young of a age because of the fact that they've got all kinds of issues that have come up because of head injuries. So I understand why they're doing it. What I don't understand is they don't play football on the when they practice anymore, John. They just walk around out there and point, and they barely get a sweat. I mean, it's interesting, and I think it's important that they have these. It's great. It's primarily certain players have to wear them. It's mandated by the NFL. But it's kind of interesting because when you go to an NFL practice these days, and you can watch it on NFL Network or ESPN or wherever you want to go, locally, whatever, you go out there, these guys are having fun. They're having a great time. They're going through the motions in a way. They certainly are practicing. They are sweating because they're moving. It's hot and everything else. But, John, the amount of collisions that I see in a practice these days in the NFL is close to zero. I mean, so it's great that they're doing this. It's great they're acknowledging this, but it's a little bit late. I think it's interesting. It would be different if they started to mandate this for games. Now, that would be a different story because then it would be a little more interesting because game time, they're playing and they're balling, and that's what they're focused on. But
yeah, and if you're somebody who's even just seen, Pete, rugby games lately,
Yeah,
sometimes on the field, there's a guy wearing something that looks very much like a Guardian cap. And
absolutely.
that's probably a guy that's had some head trauma,
Mhm.
that still wants to play rugby. It's not a hard helmet. It's not used as a weapon like a football helmet can be. Instead, it's just to protect that guy's noggin from getting hit, because there is a lot of incidental contact,
Yeah,
just butting heads in a rugby scrum
sure.
or when somebody's getting tackled. This looks a lot like that, and they're
Yep.
called Guardian caps. Pete, let's talk a little bit about Vikings. Your Vikings, because that's one of the many NFL teams Pete played for. Um, I saw that your guy Jefferson, Pete, of
Yep.
course, like we discussed,
Great
is
player.
being talked a lot about being perhaps a future Hall of Famer already.
Well, and it's only going to be his third year, John, but in his first 2 years, he's setting records. And if he does it this coming year again, which he's very easily, if he keeps up the pace he's going on, he's going to break Randy Moss's first 3 years in the NFL record. So to say this guy's pretty amazing, I don't think is a stretch. He really is. And he's an amazing guy, and he's a great guy. And he has enough ego to be great, and not so much, not too much, where he's a jerk. And that's where I'd put him, because he acknowledges who he thinks are the best receivers in the NFL, and he didn't name himself this year, but he said next year it will be me. And I would tend to agree with them. They got Kirk Cousins. We've got Kevin O'Connell, the new coach of the Vikings, who came over as the offensive coordinator from the Rams off the Super Bowl. The Vikings have a lot of high expectations, John. They did a lot of things in the offseason to make them a much better team. They really shored up the defense in a lot of ways. They picked up a linebacker, a defensive end. It's amazing, I think, what they've put together in a short period of time. I give credit to the general manager of the team. He's done a great job with that. The draft, I a little bit question that draft,
Yeah.
but they did pick up a safety who is as good as anybody. And I'll give you one guess what school he went to: Georgia.
Yep.
I mean,
What a shocker.
like just about every other player that came out of Georgia in the draft went somewhere close to the first or second round. It's absolutely amazing how good they were. But tell me a little bit about your Chicago Bears, John, because John was a Chicago Bear with Walter Payton, with a lot of greats back then, great coaches, great players. But what do you think about the Bears, John? Can they kind of make a move to the upside in the division?
Well, the big thing with the Bears, Pete, is always offense, because quite frankly, defense has always been solid with the Bears. There was that period of time when we had Walter Payton as well as Jim McMahon and so forth, where the offense with Willie Gault and Silky D and everybody else, they could really light it up. So if the defense shuts them down and is constantly giving you the ball back after just 3 downs,
Yeah.
that's typical Chicago Bear defensive football. And if the offense can actually move the ball, then of course the Bears are winners. I thought it was pretty cool, Pete, because sadly we know that during the 4th of July there was that shooting up in Highland Park.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm bringing it up is the Bears were pretty classy, because they of course have practice facilities very near that area, Pete, and they invited the high school football team from Highland Park, which is,
Great.
if you're not familiar, folks, right next to where Bears camp is. And they invited those kids to come over and see it. So that's yet another way that teams reach out to, to the not just the fans, but to the community, to be a bigger part of the community. And hats off to the Bears for doing that. That was a smart thing. I think, Pete, that the defense still looks very solid for the Bears, but I don't think you're terribly worried about the Bears going too far, because again, they've got to get the offense clicking. Now, the quarterback is a great quarterback, Fields. I haven't met him, but I've talked to a lot of people who have been close to him, and I think he's a great kid. And he is still a kid. He is so young, but he's got a great potential, Pete. Ohio State kid. The Bears love him. And I think that, with a year under his belt, it'll be a better year this year. So I'm optimistic. How about that?
Well, he's a freakish athlete. He's an unbelievable kid. Everything I've ever heard from everybody I know who's close to him, John, reports back to me and says, this guy's awesome. So I have to agree with them. And I think he's going to maybe make some moves and maybe make the Bears look a little bit better on offense this year. He just needed that 1 year in his pocket. Now he's out there. I think he learned a lot, and I think he's going to have a great second year.
I agree. Well, folks, we appreciate you tuning in for RebelCon, which is something that we're going to be putting on in Dallas, Texas. You can scan the barcode on the screen. We encourage you to do that. Gold and platinum tickets, I think, are both sold out, or maybe it's diamond and platinum
They're
tickets
gone.
are sold out. But there are still tickets. It's going to be September 21st through the 24th, RebelCon in Dallas, Texas, at the Four Seasons Hotel. So we still have some hotel rooms. You can get several nights in that hotel for less than one night of the rack rate, Pete, and put your significant other, grandkids, grandfather, whatever, up in the hotel while you come join us for 2 days of live trading, as well as a lot of great education. And, we've got Brian Sullivan, who's already an announced speaker there, Pete. We're going to have a lot of other great speakers like Tom Lee, who's already committed to it from Fundstrat. Fabulous event. It'll go September 21st through the 24th. It's limited to it's either 250, Pete, or if they let us expand it, which I'm not sure if they have, 300 people. That's a third of what it was last year because we wanted it to be more intimate. We wanted better interaction with the crowd. We loved it last year, but this year we said, let's just make it a little more personal. So again, go to marketrebellion.com/Dallas. That's marketrebellion.com/Dallas, or scan the barcode and you can join me, Pete, Mike Yamamoto, AJ Monty, Ryan. So many of our instructors, Bill Johnson and so forth, CJ and Monty from the crypto side. It's going to be a fabulous 4 days, Pete. marketrebellion.com/Dallas. Well, I guess